This ended up being quite a wild one with 1 billion in loot in total. Since so many wormholes were up around me, the plan was to check some of them out first. I then was going to use some noise 5 needlejacks to head off to some random areas and get back using Pochvan. The latter plan never happened. It would also not be the only thing that did not go according to plan. This is just what makes jumping into random wormholes so much fun. The unexpected and not quite knowing where you will end up, other than a vague hint of it's going to be a certain range of wormhole class or some random place in low security, and so on. This also ended up being one of those adventures where I'd only end up going down 2 different wormhole chains. Even then, I'd only end up exploring around 6 systems, which is quite on the small side. As many of these places were packed full of sites to run, and I was also not alone.
Warp drive active.
This first wormhole I landed in was a Class 3. Despite having an insane number of sites up, it had quite an active and recent history of things getting blown up. Far too many explorers are not making it out. As a result, I end up going quite heavy on checking D-scan. The first site of the night ended up being a drone site. Not on my list of sites I care much for. It ended up being better than I was expecting. I have also removed all cans below a certain amount of loot. This was quite a long adventure exploring wormhole space for the most part. While 10 million in loot from this site was nothing insane, I had no idea what would end up being in store for me on this adventure in EVE Online. Next up ended up being a Blood Raider relic site. I ended up finding quite a few Blood Raider sites overall this time around. kind of another average site. I would not mind getting these all day long if I did not have to wait around long between them. I was rather pleased with how many relic sites I was getting in the first portion of this adventure. Sometimes you can just run into endless data sites. It really feels like someone only went after the relic sites and left every data site behind. This one ends up being my first decent can of the day, more than doubling the total amount of loot I had acquired up till this point. That last site ended up being a lot better than I thought. As I had left with the can still up, this ended up being the theme of the evening for me. I usually try to go out exploring wormholes quite late in my time. This is usually after most of the action for the day in a lot of areas has already taken place, and things tend to be a bit quieter on Tranquility. The downside, I sometimes overlook things and would have to go back more than once to pick up the odd container I'd miss. Funny enough, some of them ended up being empty. While Blood Raider relic sites are not my top kind of site I'm hoping to get, they tend to be rather decent. I was not expecting two back-to-back decent sites. Overall, I was shocked by how many sites there were to run. At some point, I might even branch out and run other kinds of sites and wormholes as well. As this one had a lot of combat and mixed sites overall, I consider it a great night if I'm pulling in nearly 100 million in ISK from a single wormhole.
Warp drive active.
Next up, I found myself in a Class 4 wormhole. I was not that shocked, it was mostly just other wormholes. While this one ended up having a static Class 3 and 5. I found myself in a Class 2 next. Besides this, the Class 2 wormhole has a lot of signatures up. It also has a static low security that I was rather interested in checking out. I always try to pop into them as they have some rather high-value exploration sites if you can find them. This is kind of where I start to hit quite a few data sites. Knowing it was also Serpentis, I did not have quite high hopes for anything amazing to come out of it. I was, however, already here, and why turn down something that is right in front of you? I had also done the short trip back to offload some loot at a station. That is why I always love using wormholes. They can get you quite a decent distance away, yet the ability to go drop off some loot in high security at a station is usually not that far away either. Like quite a few of the sites I'd find in this wormhole, they were not that great. There were, however, quite a lot of them. At least this next one was a little better. There were also so many here with even worse loot than the first one. May they forever be forgotten. While cloaked scanning down more sites, I noticed some combat probes popped up on D-scan. A short time later, a Proteus would show up. Thankfully, I was already nice and safe. The nice thing is I just headed back out. Then I simply jumped back into a different wormhole in a different chain. Unless the Proteus would end up doing the same. That would be the last of him I'd be seeing for at least today, and it sure was. Next up, I was in another Class 2 wormhole. This place ended up having 2 high-security entry points, which would allow it to be far busier than I'd like. Despite that, it was rather silent. Yet even more of those data sites I did not care much for. At least so far, I've found a couple of rather signature-rich wormholes. I've lost count in the past of how many times I'd go out, and it's slim pickings. This time around, I was having a blast even if I was getting a lot of data sites. Those high-tech data chips were starting to slowly stack up. This container ended up having some data cores I was quite in need of as well. A total win, even with it only being 7 million in loot. Not shockingly, this place had a lot of wormholes. After getting what I would, I'd start to look for better. For some reason, a lot of people don't think much of Class 1 wormholes. While yes, the sites are expected to have less loot, sometimes you can be shocked by just how much you end up pulling out of one. Even more so with the insane amount of signatures up this one had.
Warp drive active.
Not a crazy site, but with enough better than average containers, it adds up quickly.
Warp drive active.
Forget anything I said about having lower expected in terms of loot for a Class 1 wormhole. This place was rocking, and it was just getting started as well. After all those data sites I kept finding, I was thrilled to find a relic and it being Angel as well. While I ended up having a lot higher expectations for the site than it ended up being. As you will soon see by how many containers I end up not showing. There were a couple of good ones in there to more than make up for it. At this point, seeing a ghost site pop up, I knew it could be something crazy. While the plan was to save it for last. Empty my loot and then head back in. Shortly later, while scanning down some other signatures, I discovered I was not alone in here. The good news is that the person was not interested in me or any of the kinds of sites I was running. I also noticed a few times they would disappear and show up like 10 minutes later to try to do what they were doing. They must kept seeing me and went back into hiding, which I don't blame them. The plan was to empty my loot and come back for the ghost site. I had plans to jet container out loot and just go till I got killed by the rats if I was not able to escape them. That ended up not being how things went down. After hacking the first can and being glad it was not empty, I felt like I was making good time. What I did not realize right away was that this container has 203 units of loot in it, far more than I can carry. While thinking about the rats showing up on this site and killing me, my brain was a little more in panic mode than I would have liked. After some not so quick thinking, I dumped 711 million in loot into a container. I then looted what I could. At this point, there were no more plans to try to hack more cans. I was secure in quite a massive amount of loot mode. My first trip back was 663 million. I went back, and the rest of the loot I left behind was still sitting there, with the site long gone. It seems I would not have gotten much time before the rats were going to show up anyway. Getting 711 million in loot and not being able to carry it all back is the kind of issue you can only hope to have in EVE Online, and a rather funny one.
Active. drive.
Thankfully, the last wormhole I'd explore for the evening ended up having a low security exit. Unlike in the past, where I've ended up in quite a few busy low security systems. This place just had one person and they docked up, and I feel they were waiting for me to leave. This place was loaded with combat sites. I could not believe my eyes. I ended up clearing a couple of data sites, but they were dreadful. Then a limited sleeper site popped up on the next signature I was scanning, with the insane ones I've had in high security in the past. I thought I hit the jackpot with finding this site since I'm in low security. Oh, how wrong I ended up being. This ended up being the second best container of the entire site. I was still rather glad to have it. I was just being greedy and had high hopes of finding something insane in one of the other containers. This ended up being what I found in most of the containers. It ended up being a big disappointment. At this point, I'm quite tired of my adventure. I've done something I've always avoided doing. I got too close to an explosive container. I for sure thought it would take me out, as I've been told they were deadly. It just ended up adding a gas cloud that I was able to quickly get out of, living to go and loot the last container of the site. At least the final container of the site had some better loot in it. It was, however, not again that great. Overall, quite an insane run. Due to the two largest sites I found, I ended up averaging around 277 million per hour. While not your normal run, there normally is a decent drop or two when I go out, just nothing like this.